Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of Navigating NewSpace, produced by the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program. My name is Shayna Hume, and I'm the host for this segment and a 2018 alumni of the program. The MAT Fellowship is a highly selective summer internship and mentorship program which helps to nurture the ethical exploration of the universe in the next generation of space leaders. If you want to learn more about the fellowship, we'll give you information about our applications and social media at the end of the stream. In the meanwhile, for today's episode, we're welcoming another 2018 fellow, Max Goldberg. Max, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here, Shayna. Thank you so much for having me.
And how are you doing?
I'm wonderful, as good as you can be during COVID. Enjoying my time with my family, and as I like to say, at the Goldberg compound in New Jersey. It's a grand old time to be a family man right now.
That's wonderful to hear. I'm really glad. So what have you been up to this summer?
So I finished up my master's degree in manufacturing systems engineering in May 2020. So I got my master's program cut a little bit short and thrown a little bit off the train tracks by this whole COVID-19 pandemic. So I came home in April, literally on April 2nd. I called my mom on April 1st and I said, "Hey, I'm coming home." She's like, "Are you messing with me? It's April Fool's." And I said, "No, I'm actually coming home." We packed up my car and I drove across the country from Madison, Wisconsin back to New Jersey. I've been here ever since. And I've been taking the past few months, and I'll be taking a few more months to kind of recalibrate, figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life, figure out how I want to grow up, and not what I want to do. I know what I want to do in the next 10 years, but kind of how I want to get there. And I am taking time to work on my podcast, work on my blog, and fill in a few knowledge gaps about different topics that I'm really interested in that I didn't have a chance to study about in school, and also some skills, say personal finance, which they don't necessarily teach you in school, but in my opinion is really important. So filling in some knowledge gaps and some skills gaps while I'm reflecting and figuring out where I want to take my skills and how I want to achieve my kind of 10, 15, 20-year goals.
You know, most people just take an internship for the summer. It kind of sounds like you took 10.
Well, I've had a lot of internships where I've not internships, but I've been working the past 5 years pretty intensely. From starting teams on my campus to working, and I needed a little bit of a break because burnout is real, and I am lucky enough that I can take some time, and COVID's kind of given me an opportunity to take some time to reflect and figure out where I want to go and be a lot more intentional. And I think a lot of times, especially in a field like aerospace, we dive into our careers, or we dive into opportunities without taking time to reflect and actually forward plan and be more intentional with how we're spending our time, our energy, and again, time is our most precious resource. Money will come, opportunities will come, but you can't get back time. So how do you take time to figure out what you want to do? And again, I think filling in holes, a lot of people have a lot of holes. I mean, most people have a lot of holes. It's part of being human. We're all imperfect. And for myself, I have a lot of holes that I really needed to fill in that couldn't really wait. And I wanted to take care of that before starting my career.
That's an incredibly motivational start to this. Thank you for those words. I feel like as someone who's also in the middle of the career flux at the end of grad school, that's something we all really need to hear sometimes.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to be at the end of grad school with that career flux, because you don't necessarily learn what you think you're going to learn in grad school, and you go into a program thinking you're going to get one thing out of it and coming out on the other side being a certain type of person with a certain skill set. And grad school comes, and then especially for me, where I was in a course-only master's program, then grad school goes, and a lot of the projects you thought you were going to get to work on and the resources at the university or resources in other areas that were available to you as a grad student kind of pass you by. And so you would think you're going to either go into academia or you're going to go into industry and you're going to go just get a job. Or maybe you think, the way that I thought I was going to go into university, both undergrad and grad school, I did them back to back. I'd go in, figure out how to start a company, have a company I'm running when I get out of school, and be getting after it on a day-to-day basis. But then you realize that grad school and undergrad will burn you out. You haven't necessarily started that thing that's going to be your company. And you really do need some time to fill in the holes in places that you wanted to grow while you were in grad school, while you were in undergrad, but you didn't have the opportunity to because, school.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take one step back really quickly, because at the beginning of the segment, I didn't go through your whole resume, but we're getting lots of references to some of the things that I remember you having done. Could you tell us a little bit about, the rocket team at Madison and about X Prize and a little bit about your biography and work history?
Yeah, definitely. I misheard you for a second when you said biography. I thought you said geography, and I was like, all right, you go that way too. No, but I guess I'll cover some of the geography. So I started my undergrad in materials engineering at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2015. I did materials engineering because my long-term thesis of where I want to go over the next 10 to 20 years, once I have sufficient capital and reputation, is I think there's a huge opportunity to converge material science, materials engineering with aerospace and space exploration. So if you look at what we need to do in space, we need to go to other planets, colonize those planets, build civilizations on those planets. How do you do that? You need materials, you need manufacturing, and you need to be able to make things. But we don't want to bring everything with us because if you put it on rockets, it's really, really heavy. So it's a lot cheaper to make things on other planets, but you need materials to make things on other planets. So my whole thesis is how can I later on in my career, or again, once I have the money and the capital, build material science companies and resource utilization companies for space exploration. So I started my degree in materials engineering with that end goal in mind. Throughout my degree, freshman year, I joined a team called Badger Loop because I wanted to plug more deeply into kind of like hands-on engineering, building things. I heard vehicle teams were a really great way to do that. And I also wanted to kind of get close to space. And SpaceX was putting on the Hyperloop competition, so I joined this team called Badger Loop. I spent 2.5 years working on the battery system for Badger Loop for their first and second pods as their battery team lead. Did that, ended that tenure, and learned of an opportunity to go work with an entrepreneur in California named Peter Diamandis. I applied for this. At first, it was an internship. Applied for the internship. Was fortunate enough to be accepted for the internship. Had a wonderful summer working with Peter and the team. And then I came on in more of a kind of part-time entrepreneur in residence role for the next 18 months. I helped Peter with a bunch of business development projects. One of the programs Shayna was a part of called the Strikeforce Fellowship. We basically recruited very similar to the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program. We recruited 30 young entrepreneurs from around the world, brought them together, gave them programming, introduced them to Peter's ecosystem. I also helped him publish his latest book called The Future's Faster Than You Think, which I highly recommend going to read because it's freaking phenomenal, super fast paced. And it's a great kind of wake up call and realignment toward the positive and abundance mindset in the midst of 2020, which has been a pretty wild year. Helped him with the fellowship, helped him with the book launch, helped him with a few other projects here and there. And in May, as I was finishing up my master's degree, I went on my separate ways. I want to go explore new opportunities. I want to go work on my own companies. And again, I needed some time to think. In addition to my time with Peter at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I learned actually through my work with Peter, of a competition called the Base 11 Space Challenge. The Base 11 Space Challenge I'm actually not sure if it's still going on because of COVID, but it is a $1 million prize for the first student team to design, build, and launch a liquid rocket to the Kármán line. So it was kind of a play on the X Prize. The initial X Prize was a $10 million prize for the first team to build any type of human spaceflight vehicle that could launch, land, relaunch, re-land within a 2-week period. One person with seats for 3 people on the vehicle. So that was one in 2004, I want to say. I think 2004. And so the Base 11 Space Challenge was a play on that to incentivize and motivate the next generation of aerospace engineers and entrepreneurs, because right now space industry is booming. SpaceX is going like this with their launches. Satellite launches are going like this. Everything's going exponential. But as things go exponential, they get more and more complicated, and you need more and more talent to feed into that ecosystem. And there are not enough aerospace engineers. There are not enough aerospace entrepreneurs to maintain this really fast growing and really freaking complicated ecosystem. And it's not just rockets, it's resource utilization tech, satellites, communications protocols, et cetera, et cetera. So I started this team to compete in the Base 11 Space Challenge at Wisconsin called Wisconsin Space Race. We were competing in that for about 18 months. In January, due to a variety of factors, we decided to change course and pivot away from the competition because building a liquid rocket from scratch, I'll note that University of Wisconsin-Madison doesn't have a liquid rocket program. And now we don't even really have any rocketry programs or until we started this team. So my leadership team and I, and my co-founder, Brandon Wilson. Brandon, shout out to you if you're listening. We decided to pivot away from the Base 11 space challenge and towards a much more manageable goal of building a freaking rocket, of building a launch facility on Wisconsin's campus, similar to what Purdue has and some other, Embry-Riddle has this, some other leading space institutions have this. How do you build a kind of a low cost but really effective liquid propulsion lab? So we pivoted the team towards pursuing that. I stepped away as I was graduating and handed off the leadership. And now we are here. Along the way, as I was working for Peter, I did the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program, which I used my internship for the Matthew program as my internship with Peter, but we worked out really nicely. And now we are here. And now I am taking some time to, I guess the last thing I'll throw out there, and I'll shamelessly plug, I host a podcast where I've gotten really interested in the past few years based on my experience with Peter, through the fellowship that I ran, through some of the competition teams that I've worked on. I worked at the makerspace at school, part-time, helping students build different projects. So I've become really interested in the theme that there's a lot of resources that have come online since like 2000, 2001 during the dot-com boom. There are a lot of resources that have come online to help young entrepreneurs, young engineers, I like to call them entrepreneurs, to help them create and build things faster, cheaper, and with higher fidelity than ever before. If you wanted to go build a drone or a CubeSat, typically you'd have to go join some special projects team at Lockheed Martin and work for 40 years before you had the cachet that you could actually go dictate what you wanted to do on a project like that. Again, at a Lockheed Martin or a Boeing or at a Honeywell, whatever it might be. But thanks to kind of the maker movement, the internet, open source tech, 3D printing, startup accelerators, new ways to access venture funding, new ways to access capital, there has been an explosion in the ability for young people at the start of their careers to, again, build things for cheaper, faster, and with higher fidelity than ever before. And so I have a podcast and a blog that explores that, along with other topics and the kind of resource utilization that I'm really interested in. And so I've worked on that throughout my undergrad, and I'm continuing to work on that right now. So that's me in a nutshell. I also really like surfing and martial arts. So hope that.
You just hit on at least 10 things that I have to ask you about. So please be patient.
Yeah, please.
We'll get through all the questions that just came to mind. But for anyone curious, at the end, I do have the link ready to bring us to Next Frontier if you want to listen to the podcast.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Shayna.
Work. So all of that we'll get to by the end. So first of all, I find it incredibly interesting how you've gravitated towards these sorts of prize situations. For those who don't know, X Prize was founded on the model that prizes are an effective way to stimulate new ideas. And so by offering prizes for the winner or winners, you incentivize people to pull different money, different grants and opportunities. And in doing so, they can accomplish some pretty amazing things. And so you were doing this through, you said it's called Base 11?
So Base 11 is a nonprofit organization that was putting on this space challenge. They invited university teams. From the requirements for the competition where you have to be a university team, I guess majority university students, and you have to build a liquid rocket. And you have to be university sanctioned. That was the university team requirement, and then build a liquid rocket. And the first one to launch it and get it to the Kármán line, we get $1 million for the team to do whatever they wanted with. I think half of it had to go to university programming that related to space, and then the other half team could invest however they wanted it. Yeah, I can dive deeper there whenever you're interested.
That's super awesome. I actually have a question though, kind of on the prizes note. So you've done X Prize, you've done this new competition. What do you think makes the prize and challenge model for teamwork in engineering so effective? Because it's become extremely popular. Yeah,
so I didn't ever really work directly for X Prize. I worked for Peter, who founded X Prize. I worked at the X Prize office, so a little convoluted there. However, prizes are fascinating, and I think that prizes do what a lot of other incentive programs fundamentally do, is they capitalize on human psychology and the desire to compete, be competitive, to win things, and they kind of put the ball back into the innovator and the entrepreneur's hands. There's another interesting, I haven't really thought to flesh this out, but there's another interesting phenomenon where where the person who might be really good at like designing something, engineering something, building something might not necessarily be the person who's really good at identifying the problem, or kind of outlining what the need is, what the problem is. So prizes and incentive competitions are a really unique way to kind of merge those two things. So again, base 11, students might not realize that they're interested in aerospace, but there's this really cool opportunity to win $1 million and get exposure to leading space companies, and you get to have hands-on time with liquid rocket hardware. That then brings a lot of engineers who might not otherwise have been interested in space saying, hey, maybe I'll try this out. I'm a good engineer. I don't really know what I want to work on, but let's go try it out. And I saw that a lot with base 11, where people were like, hey, I just want to get better at engineering. I don't really know what problem to work on. So I would say to them, hey, come work on our rocket. It's a really cool problem. You can work on everything from embedded systems, electronics hardware, propulsion, thermodynamics, simulations, manufacturing, business, fundraising, et cetera, et cetera. And it gives people something to rally behind that they might not have necessarily had the problem identification experience and knowledge set to do otherwise. And again, I think the incentive model, I like to win. I competed in martial arts for a while, and anything where I can go compete and win, I freaking love. And so that's kind of what gets me going about the prize model. And I know for other people who I've talked to, that's very similar. And you don't just see that in prizes, you see that at hackathons, business plan competitions, makeathons, things like this, where there's some incentive to go innovate on a problem and win and outdo people, and at the same time collaborate and work with people. It's very interesting, the human psychology and kind of innovation mechanics that come into play.
Yeah, I think it's so cool how many things in commercial aerospace it's led to specifically. I'm sure people listening to this know about everything that happened to the Mojave, originally with scaled composites. And if you don't, please look it up. We don't have enough time to cover it all, but it is so interesting.
There's a great book about it called How to Make a Spaceship or How to Build a Spaceship. Mm-hmm. I always convolute the title. And I'll throw out another note. I'm not 100% clear on the history here, but I know that there is some relation. I know that Matthew, who the fellowship is named after, I know that he worked for X Prize, and I also believe that he was an instrumental figure or component. Please, nobody quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure this is how it went, in helping NASA get their challenge set approved, the Grand Centennial challenges. I know that there's some tie between Matthew, X Prize, and Grand Centennial challenges that exists out there.
The world is big, but the space family is small and very interconnected. Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, you were kind of at X Prize, mainly working for Peter. What was it like, and there was no day-to-day, I'm sure, but what kind of stuff did you do there? What was it like to be an entrepreneur in technology?
Yeah, again, so I was a variety of business development tasks. I don't know that I'll dive into too many specifics, but my big projects that I worked on with Peter were managing that Strike Force Fellowship, and the biggest one was really helping him get his book launched. So it was a lot of wearing a different hats, from research to marketing to writing to networking and building relationships. And then the next project I worked on toward the end was really as I'd call it kind of being like researcher in residence for another company that Peter was starting, and doing diligence on a variety of different products, figuring out where the product market fit might be, and also as putting my engineering hat on and my STEM hat on, and decoding some of the more bleeding edge, cutting edge literature around some of the technologies we were looking at. It was a really unique and interesting experience to work with someone who was such an innovator in the space world on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I can only imagine. From my limited interactions with Peter, mm-hmm. He always puts me into a state of complete amazement. Mm-hmm. Very cool. So you came in with a thesis into the Matthew program and into your work with Peter, this idea that resource utilization and manufacturing was going to be really important in future. Where did you find this idea, and when did it really take hold that that's what you were going to dedicate time to?
Oh, that's a good question. I wouldn't say that it really bled over into any of my work with Peter. It just kind of is my guiding star of where I see a really unique problem set that I'm interested in. My family was always been in manufacturing and creating things. And since I was a little kid, I've always loved space. And I remember my neighbor, shout out to the Phonies, their daughter was getting her degree in material science when I was a little kid. And I would remember being over there for a meal. And we were talking about material science, and it always stuck in my head that material science kind of is the path that I should go in the engineering world, because I like understanding things on a really small fundamental level. Read Robert Zubrin's book. My neighbor was told me about material science as a career path, or career trajectory. And I've always been interested in how do we solve problems that we're going to have in space, on Earth, for on Earth niches. So we look at Mars, we look at what we need to do on Mars. There's a lot of carbon on Mars that we have available to use. We look on Earth, we have a problem with carbon, or really it's an opportunity with carbon. So how can we find connections like that? Here's another one that I'm really interested right now. I put out 2 blogs about it recently. I'll probably put out another one in the next 3 or 4 weeks after I've had time to kind of dive into the next topic. Critical minerals in the US right now, a huge problem we're facing, and possibly a huge cause of our geopolitical situation in the world, is the fact that we are tremendously reliant. I don't have the specific number in front of me, but I think it's 85% plus for critical mineral imports on foreign countries who are adversarial with the United States, between China, or if you look at cobalt in the Congo, not necessarily adversarial, but very unstable region. So our supply chains are super vulnerable on the critical mineral front. Critical minerals, I think 5 minerals in iPhones, again, don't have the numbers in the blog. You can find them online, and we can put them in somewhere later on. But critical minerals are used in iPhones, they're used in F-35 fighter jets, they're used in wind turbines, they're used in solar panels, they're used in your MacBook. They're literally used in everything that's in a high-tech economy, any laser or optic, any SEM, any scanning electron microscope, anything you want to do in science and STEM and engineering right now. In the high-tech economy, you need critical minerals, you need rare earth metals, you need magnets. And we are very dependent on other countries for our supply chain, and countries that are either adversarial or very unstable. So in the US, we have access to a lot of these minerals. Like, it's not like they don't exist here. The problem is it's not economically efficient to produce them here right now. So one of my interest areas now is, what are the technologies, what are the enabling technologies we need to develop to drive down production costs in the US, to drive down processing costs in the US, to make production in the US competitive with other places on the globe. If you look at China, they don't necessarily care about environmental regulations, and there's been a lot of human rights problems with their workforce. So how can we compete with that? We need to compete with that with technology. And how does that tie back into space? So the way that ties back into space is, if you go to another planet, we also need to utilize resources. We need to utilize critical minerals. We need to build things when you're going to need lasers. We're going to need computer chips. We're going to need solar panels. We're going to need nuclear reactors. We're going to need engines, et cetera, et cetera. So how can we build technologies on Earth? And again, just trying to find niche markets where technologies on Earth can then go apply to technologies eventually on space. Just again, for me, because I'm passionate about space, and I still want to be able to do things on Earth at this point in time. So what are the technologies that will enable us to mine, process more efficiently in the United States? And then how can we apply those to what we're going to want to do in space? So how can we have autonomous prospecting on Mars? How can we then use that technology on Earth, and vice versa? So that's another area that I'm really interested right now, on the resources and manufacturing side of things. And I think finding those problems that are related to manufacturing, resources, supply chain, engineering, space, and problems on Earth right now are really, really important.
Yeah. So you're thinking forward to all of this technology before some of it has even really been fully fleshed out and invented and created. What is it like to make a career out of technologies that don't necessarily exist yet?
Well, I have yet to make a career. I'm still, like I said at the beginning, figuring it out.
How do you face it?
Sorry?
How do you face it? How do you look ahead and begin to think of, the kind of work that you can do to build yourself up along the way?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said at the beginning, it's really difficult going into a master's program, like knowing what you're going to get out at the end. And right now, I don't feel like I got out of my master's degree necessarily what I intended to. And I think that's just the way our academic system goes. I learned so much incredible information, and I gained new skills, but there are still skills I want to gain. How am I building a career around problems that have not been fully defined and solutions that don't exist yet. And the way I'm doing that is I'm taking some time, I'm picking a topic and I'm going and I'm writing about it, or I'm finding someone to interview for my podcast, or I am, playing my network and reaching out on LinkedIn and saying, hey, can I grab 10 minutes on the phone to learn more about this industry? I'm really trying to slow down and learn about a lot of different things I'm interested in, and be more intentional about, hey, where do I want my career to take me? And what are kind of the important skills I need right now that can enable me to do better in my career later on. And I'm still figuring it out. I have no idea. But I think researching, writing, reading, podcasting has been really helpful for me to learn more about different topics I'm really interested in. Just something to do rather than just like, oh yeah, I'm interested in this. Let's go watch YouTube videos.
Yeah, I think one of the things that most of us being young people in space, have in common is that none of us really know what the path is forward, and we're all just kind of stumbling and trying to figure it out and trying to do a good job of it.
It's so crazy actually, because you would think space is this big heritage thing. You go in, you're an aerospace engineer, you go yada yada yada. You work at a company, you do CAD drawings, or you do foundry work as a materials engineer for a while, and then you have the space skill set, and now you get after it.
But since we are coming close to the end of time, something I wanted to ask you. You work on convergence, you work on exponential technologies, futurism, thinking about what comes next. If you could do anything, if you had a personal moonshot, how would you summarize it right now?
I would come back to the thesis of how do we build material science and resource utilization companies that solve problems in space, but also do it in a way that's profitable for problems on Earth. I think there's a lot of different themes that can fall into that category. If you gave me $1 billion tomorrow, I would probably start building that company, acquiring technologies, acquiring IP that relates to that theme, not for the space applications at first, but I would say, hey, this might have something to do with space in the future. Let's see what problems we can tackle with it on Earth. That's probably what I would start doing. I'd probably start right now with the critical mineral space, just because I'm really interested in that, and then build out from there into different aerospace technology, space technologies, or things that relate to space. But again, sticking to the theme of material science, engineering, and resource utilization in aerospace.
Do you think those companies and solutions are going to exist within your lifetime?
Well, I think a lot of them have to. I hope that we stay in a regulatory environment that is friendly to those types of companies coming online, and that we still have incentives and support from I would call them government. They started as kind of defense organizations, and now they're also not just defense, but defense and kind of like economic innovation organizations, talking about NASA, and that the support for big audacious missions like Artemis, or looking back to Apollo, continues, and they continue in ways that aren't ridiculously over budget and inefficient, that they continue in efficient, productive, and effective ways to support the private space ecosystem. And again, that the ability to solve problems on Earth and in the United States is still there, and there's a friendly entrepreneurial environment in the next decade to 2 decades. If that's the case, then I definitely think that they will that we will evolve towards that. It's inevitable, as some folks like to say. It has to. There's a lot of these technologies. If you like MacBooks and you want MacBooks to keep getting faster, and we've become so used to the MacBook getting faster, you need so many technologies to keep making the MacBook faster, and a lot of those will. This is just an analogy. Just the MacBook is a placeholder for any high tech device that we like. We need technologies to keep innovating, to keep up our expectation of growth, and I think it will continue that way for a long time.
I think that's an exciting future to look forward to, and I know I'm hoping for it.
I also think we will be back on the moon with Artemis by 2024.
Ooh, that is an ambitious one. Okay, we'll have to talk about that after the stream, because I could argue that. Okay, so to close up, I've been asking every single guest the same question, because although people who love space have tons of reasons to love space and to want all of this to happen, Not everyone sees the value of space, and in particularly turbulent times for society, like this year, where you could fill in the blank with a million different frustrating, traumatic, and horrible things that are happening. How do you convince other people that these technologies and that this space is really worth it?
I have so many different ways to slice this question, but I will say first and foremost, I mean, there have been so many studies. I think the average return for money invested into, there was a study that showed that the average return for money in taxpayer dollars invested into NASA returned like an 800% return in GDP growth and in economic value, just from the technologies, the IP, the patents that were generated, and then divvied out to private industry. Hold stats so well, but you can go and find that somewhere online. So the investment into space exploration, not just private, returns so many dividends to the rest of the economy, whether it be tires that were built for moon rovers that now make up the tires on every car, or a whole host of other things.
Looks like we have one more cut out before the end of the program. All right, I'm going to give him just a moment to come back online. But in the meanwhile, while I wait for Max to reload, I might as well put up on the screen some places where you can go and find out more about his work. I totally encourage you to look up all of the books that he mentioned. How to Build a Spaceship, all of Peter Diamandis's books are all incredible reads that will give you more information about Max's passions. Otherwise, if you want to learn more about what Max does, you can find his podcast at nextfrontier.org/podcast, and you can also find out and follow him on his LinkedIn to learn more about his work. It appears as if he is still frozen, so unfortunately, I might not get to add him back before the end of the podcast. However, he's active on social media, and as always, we encourage you to interact with our fellows and to keep asking questions, especially if you're a prospective applicant and, we can help you along your journey in space. Applications will be opening up early this fall, so keep an eye out if you're one of the applicants looking forward to the fall process. And if you just want to learn more about the program, you can do so at MatthewIsakowitzFellowship.org, or you can find us and interact with us on social medias at Matt Fellowship. Thank you so much for sticking with us, especially through the technical difficulties today. Please reach out anytime. We look forward to chatting with you. Bye.